Dear Mitrom and Bandhuvam, welcome to South Asia Maps Intellectual Kshatriya channel. This is your presenter J. Reddy at South Asia Maps, which is an intellectual Kshatriya channel and an educational channel. I will bring the knowledge, geography, history, heritage and culture of South Asian region south of Karakoram Mountains in the form of icons, essentially the maps, the pictures and images for your articulation and easy grasping. Today I will be discussing about the history of Punjab, the fascinating region of Bharat, South Asia, the land of MahaRaja Ranjit-Singh, the Sher-e-Punjab. I will discuss about the 5 treaties that were signed in 1809 to 1849. The first treaty was signed in 1809, the Treaty of Amritsar. The last treaty was signed in 49, that is 40 years later. Totally 5 treaties were signed in 4 years, 40 years, and they have played a very prominent role in molding the history today. Before that, I strongly request all my audience who continue to enjoy such a meticulously prepared presentations with maps and icons and beautiful diagrams drawn and redrawn for you. Please go to South Asia Maps J. Reddy YouTube channel and subscribe our channel and you will be notified. There are more than 80 videos present in appropriate playlists. You can enjoy them, listen them and get immense amount of knowledge and intellectual pleasure of browsing through fascinating history and heritage aspects of Mother Bharat, that is about South Asia maps. And with that introduction, I will continue our today's topic, that is the Punjab history and 5 treaties. The 5 treaties of Punjab history, and this is the same maps, and these are the maps of Voice of India think tank, Sitaram Goyalji, intellectual Kshatriya of modern time and greatest thinker of modern India, Sri Ram Swarupji, and present Indology scholar, Acharya Coenraad Elst from Belgium. And yeah, excuse me, this is the Punjab history 5 treaties. After this presentation, you will get a fascinating idea why these 5 treaties are important in Punjab, how they affect our lives today in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh immensely. You will get a clear, articulate idea, not just the little information about the treaties or signatories. After this, you will get a great clarity about it. And before that, I will give you the context. The context is about Punjab. Here, as usual, we are in Jamuna region, the Jamuna River, Yamuna River, Delhi district. It was a district in British Punjab that stayed round about for 100 years from 1849 to 1947, nearly 100 years. Delhi was a district in Haryanvi speaking region of Ambala division or Delhi division of British Punjab. This is Sutlej River coming from Lahore and Spiti area, goes to Bakranangal region, that is Bilaspur district, and descends into the Punjab plains at Ropar. This is the Ropar here. And I have represented 3 these districts, and you will know why I have represented only these 3. This is the Firozpur district, this is Ludhiana district, this is Ambala district, that is Jagadri, Yamunanagar, and even Ropar, that is Rupnagar in Punjab, was in Ambala district for a lot of years. This is Sutlej. South of Sutlej is a Sutlej states territories belong to East India Company Bahadur and their protectorates. Here we'll have Patiala, Naba, Jind, Lahore, Petaudi, Duzana, Khalsa, and so many other princely states. They're all British territory or the protectorate. Their allies are princely state or Thakurias or Jagiris and so on. Bahawalpur, princely state south of Sutlej, that is Bahawal Nagar, Fort Abbas, Bahawalpur, Rahimyar Khan, south of Sutlej, across Multan. Why Sutlej river I represented, you will know very soon. This is the Sutlej river, that is the boundary between north Rnj.Sg territories, that is Trans-Sutlej, and south British territories, that is the first treaty. 5 treaties were signed, right? And you have to remember only 2 towns, Lahore town or Lahore district. Across Lahore there is Amritsar. There is Amritsar, Ajnala, Taran, Patti, and so on. Then we have Batala, Gurdaspur, Pathankot, so on. If you remember Lahore, remember 2 treaties were signed in that city. Lahore-I, Lahore-II. 2 treaties were signed in Amritsar city. That is again a very important town. This is called Major region, heartland of Punjab, south of Siwalik's mountains, in the Punjab plains, in the Bhairaval, that is the Bias river and Ravi river. Bias river now joins Sutlej at Harike and continues as a part of Sutlej, but historically that flowed separately parallel. That's why still the name is Bhairaval, that is the Bias river and Ravi river. This is the Ravi river coming from Brahmaur in the Chamba district of today's Himachali Punjab and skirts Dalhousie, Chamba, those regions, and north of Pathankot and Madhopur in Jammu Kashmir, and continues in Lahore and joins the Chenab river. Chenab river joins Chenab river, and Chenab river and Sutlej join and form the Panjnad that joins Sindhu river as a tributary. Left bank tributary of Sindhu is Panjnad river that gathers the 5 streams, Jhelum and Chenab and Ravi and Sutlej and Bias. And Ravi is also very important. It comes in the Amritsar Treaty. That is the second Amritsar Treaty is related to Ravi river that was signed. Before that, here I will enlarge the maps and you can just keep in mind. First Treaty of Amritsar and second Treaty of Amritsar in green color. Then the first Treaty of Lahore, second Treaty of Lahore. So we will be here talking about the first Amritsar Treaty, second Amritsar Treaty, first Lahore Treaty, second Lahore Treaty. Before the final treaty, one more treaty was signed, that is Bhairaval Treaty. Treaty of Bhairaval. Bhairaval is a place near Lahore, between Lahore and Amritsar. So there are the 5 treaties. 5 treaties were signed within 40 years. First treaty was signed 1809, Treaty of Amritsar. Sutlej became the boundary between MahaRaja's territories in the north and British East India Company territories in the south. That is Sutlej boundary 1809. So first treaty, Amritsar Treaty, is Sutlej boundary treaty. First treaty is Sutlej boundary. Last treaty, of course, is the annexation of Punjab, Khalsa Sarkar, Lahore's Darbar became that their territories became British East India Company Bahadur territories. That is the final treaty. Of course, the treaties has to be mostly signed in the big cities. That is the capital of Khalsa Sarkar, Lahore. Easy to remember. First you start with Amritsar, then you end with the Lahore second. And after Amritsar, naturally the Lahore first treaty. That is the Indemnity Treaty. That was signed in 1846, March 9th. What is indemnity? Why it signed indemnity? That treaty, the border between the Sikh government has shrunk and British government moved from Sutlej to Bias. So I have represented Bias here. That is the Lahore Treaty, is the Indemnity Treaty. Indemnity is nothing but a fine. It is the penalty. It is the money Khalsa Sarkar has to give to East India Company because it lacked enough money, it gave the territories. Essentially the penalty for starting the war. That is the first treaty. British army moved into Punjab, Khalsa Sarkar. Within 1 week, one more treaty was signed. That was signed in Amritsar. That was not signed in Lahore. There is a reason. The second treaty was signed between the East India Company representatives, Henry Montgomery Lawrence and Frederick Curry. Frederick Curry was the foreign secretary to the Governor General of East India Company, Bahadur. At that time, Governor General was Lord Hardinge. Remember, very hard. He hit Punjab very hard, so he is Lord Hardinge. His representative, Frederick Curry, and Montgomery Lawrence, Henry Montgomery Lawrence. There are 3 Lawrences, and he is the middle one, Henry Montgomery Lawrence. It was signed between these representatives of the British East India Company, Bahadur, and Raja of Jammu, Gulab Singh Dogra. Sikh Sarkar was not at all involved because now British became the legatees. They got the hilly areas between River Ravi and Zeelam, that is Jammu, Katwa, Riyasi, Rajour, Poonch and Muzaffarabad, Mirpur, Baramulla, Anantnag, Verinag, Pulwama, Khanabal, all those North Kashmir, South Kashmir and Ladakh and Baltistan, all those areas. That was signed between, that is Amritsar, between Gulab Singh Dogra and British. So that means the first, next the Treaty of Bhairaval, that was signed within 8 months after the second Treaty of Amritsar. That is essentially subsidiary alliance. And we'll look at that little more detail. Finally, the Lahore Annexation Treaty, second Lahore Treaty was signed 3 years later almost. So that is in brief about these treaties, and we look this little more further. That is picture of MahaRaja Rnj.Sg, and Lord Minto was the Governor General in 1807 to 13, and Lord Delhousie. The first treaty, that is Amritsar Treaty, was signed between Rnj.Sg and Charles Metcalfe as a representative of Lord Minto. Lord Minto's time was 1807 to 30. That means the treaty was signed in 1809 at a place called Amritsar on Bari Doab, close to Lahore, east of Lahore, round about 50 to 70 kilometers or so. The result of the first treaty of Amritsar is the Sutlej become the territory boundary between Rnj.Sg's territories in the north and British East India Company territory. Rnj.Sg should not cross these areas and annex any of the principalities here, like Patiala, Jind, Nabha, Lahore, all those areas, and they essentially now became British Protectorate. British East India Company, Bahadur, became the paramount power south of Sutlej, and treaty was signed between MahaRaja Rnj.Sg and Charles Metcalfe on behalf of Lord Minto. That is at Amritsar. That is the first treaty, Sutlej border, 1809. Then afterwards, nearly 30 years, there was a amity, the friendship between the MahaRaja and British East India Company. That means Minto demitted office in 1813, then succeeded by Lord Hastings. That means he was round about 23, 10-year term or so. Then Amhet, 23 to 28 or so. And after Amhet, William Bentinck was the Governor General up to 34, 35 also. And afterwards, Charles Metcalfe was the Governor General 1 year. And afterwards, Lord Auckland. During the Auckland time, MahaRaja Rnj.Sg passed away a natural death in 1839 at Lahore. That means 30 years after signing the treaty, MahaRaja Rnj.Sg passed away. Still, there was an amity between the East India Company Bahadur and MahaRaja Rnj.Sg and his descendants. 30 years nothing happened. Then the events moved very rapidly. After the death of Rnj.Sg, none of his inheritors were capable of governing essentially very turbulent frontier region. There was a lot of assassinations of the rulers and divans, chief ministers or prime ministers and generals. And at the same time, British also occupied the Sindh. Sindh, which was ruled by a Nawab, Thalpur Nawabs, were defeated at Battle of Hyderabad on Sindh River, not Deccan Hyderabad, that is Nizam's territory. Battle of Hyderabad, Battle of Mayani, Nawab's forces defeated. Sindh was occupied by Charles Napier and Sindh became the British East India Company territory. So now they are completely rimmed, means totally surrounded by the British, and across the Khyber Pass, the Afghans, Dost Muhammad Khan was their eternal enemy because he is a Musalman, and Maharaja controlled the Pashtun areas like Peshawar region and Jamrat, Peshawar, Swabi, Mardan, Kohat, Banu and all those areas. So 1943 nothing happened, and 45, 46 January, February, March, the war broke down between the East India Company Bahadur and before that Lahore district here, and this is the Gujranwala district, is the district where Maharaja Rnj.Sg comes from, and across Zeelam there is Rawalpindi district and Attock district where the river Indus descends into the plain, and between the Indus river and Jhelum river, this is called Hazara area. I have shown the Jammu and Kashmir, the hilly areas, that will be explained in this presentation as we move forward. Thus, in essence, that is the map. So, after the defeat of the Sikhs, now the British army moved. That is the Treaty of Lahore, because important city in the Lahore, the Governor General, his representatives, Frederick Curry, Montgomery Lawrence, and all these people reached the Lahore, and the representatives of the Governor General, on behalf of the Khalsa Sarkar, Raja of Jammu, who was a prominent courtier and colleague of Rnj.Sg, represented and established and made a treaty help. He didn't sign the treaty, but he helped. He was little bit not in good relations with the court because he's an experienced diplomat, general and a leader. Khalsa Sarkar asked his services. He came in and made the treaty. That is the Treaty of Lahore, signed by Frederick Curry, Henry Montgomery Lawrence on behalf of Lord Hardinge and Khalsa Sarkar. That means Sikhs gave the territory of Doab. That means British territory moved from Sutlej to Doab, that is the river Bias, 1846, the first Lahore Treaty. That is the Indemnity Treaty. They gave the land and they also owed 1.5 crore rupees. That means 150 lakhs. They had only 75 lakhs in their treasury, and they gave 75, remaining 75 lakh, they gave the territory, hilly regions, north of river Ravi, east of river Jhelum. Originally it was Indus, that means included the Hazara district, that means British got Hazara, Muzaffarabad and Punch, Mirpur, Riyasi, Rajouri and Jammu and Katwa, Udhampur and Doda, Kishtwar, and of course the Valley of Kashmir, Ladakh region, Baltistan, all those areas. British got it, but they didn't have the manpower to govern them. They sold it to or gave it to Gulab Singh. Gulab Singh gave them 75 lakh rupees. That is the second Treaty of Amritsar. That came within a week after the Treaty of Lahore, first treaty. Remember, Lahore Treaty 1 was signed here because British has nowhere taken into confidence the Sardars of Lahore because now it is their territory. All the hilly areas 1 week before Lahore Darbar gave them. Now they are the legatees means inheritors. They don't need. So you see the importance, even the minute events, if you pay attention, the treaty was not signed in Lahore. None of the Sardars were involved in the signing the treaty. The treaty was signed in other important town close to Lahore, that is Amritsar. There are only 3 signatories. 2 representatives of Lord Hardinge, the Governor General at that time, the same people who signed the Lahore Treaty one week before on behalf of the Governor General of East India Company, Frederick Curry, the Foreign Secretary, and Henry Montgomery Lawrence, who is a very important leader, played in the Punjab politics administration. We look at that is a big story, and to make it short, those 2 people and Gulab Singh Dogra, MahaRaja Gulab Singh Dogra signed it. They signed it in Amritsar. That is the second treaty. Second Amritsar Treaty, Ravi and Jhelum are the important geographical boundaries. That means all the hilly areas. That is the Sivaliks, the Pir Panjals and Himadris. Excuse me for my allergies. And that is the Greater Himalayas. All those regions between the river Ravi and river Jhelum were given to the British, and they gave it to Raja Gulab Singh Dogra. That was the second Amritsar Treaty. Because remember, first Amritsar Treaty was Sutlej. Second Amritsar Treaty, you can remember Ravi and Jhelum. Second Amritsar Treaty is nothing but princely state of Jammu and Kashmir establishment. First Amritsar Treaty is the boundary treaty. Second Amritsar Treaty is the establishment of princely state of Jammu and Kashmir. You should also keep in mind there is one more minor thing that you should not miss. Previously in this area there was only one MahaRaja. MahaRaja is a bigger title, right? More power, more territory, more army, more revenue. Otherwise small rulers are called Rajas. The Raja of like Faridkot, Raja of Kapurthala, Raja of Patiala, and Raja of Jind, Raja of Lahore, or Nawab of Lahore, like that. There was only one MahaRaja, Rnj.Sg, and his descendants at that time, young minor Dhulip Singh MahaRaja, around about 7 years or so. Now they elevated the Raja Gulab Singh Dogra, who was a courtier and also ruler of Jammu region, into MahaRaja. The designation is not a trivial. Now essentially there are 2 MahaRajas in this region. In fact, the geographic area of Dhulip Singh Dogra at one stage was much bigger than the MahaRaja Dhulip Singh's area. And he held one of the prized possessions on the planet Earth, Valley of Kashmir, that is Anantnag, Verinag, Kanibal, Pulwama, Gandarbal, and Bandipur, Kupwara, Baramulla. All those fascinating lands he held it. So there are now 2 MahaRajas in that region, MahaRaja of Jammu and Kashmir and MahaRaja of Khalsa Darbar at Lahore. That is second Amritsar Treaty. First Amritsar is Sutlej border, second Amritsar is Jammu and Kashmir. After the war, British occupied the area, that is the first Lahore. Then why the Bhairaval Treaty came? That is very interesting. Bhairaval Treaty, this first Lahore, second Amritsar, Bhairaval, all are signed within the same year, 1846, after the war was concluded, because the Sarkar, the leaders in the Khalsa Darbar, feared that there will be a rebellion because they have given a lot of territory, they have shed the sovereignty. Now there is everywhere British cantonment and troops, Bengal army and Hindustani army in the Khalsa territory. They were fearful that they may be overthrown. That is also one reason. Other reason is also the leaders, the British leaders also manipulated the minds of those Sardars. At that time, after occupation, the first Lahore Treaty, Dhulip Singh was still MahaRaja. Formally, he is the MahaRaja, and his mother Jindan Kaur is the regent of MahaRaja. She did all the administration, all departments are under control. Of course, the leaders, Sardars, helped her. British were still there. Now, the Treaty of Bhairaval signed, that means British will not, they have to leave Punjab by December 1840. They didn't leave, they wanted to stay there. And this treaty was indirectly imposed on the Lahore Sarkar, the manipulator. And also very important feature, Jindan Kaur was taken away as a regent to the young Maharaja. Instead of that, they put council, Regency Council of 8 Sardars. Of course, all these 8 Sardars were same Sardars the British leaders cultivated during the last 10 months, Henry Montgomery Lawrence and Frederick Curry. Now the council was made, these Sardars were nominated members of the council, and the leader or the chairman of that Regency Council is not Jindan Kaur. She was pensioned off and removed from the Lahore, eventually sent to Benares. Henry Montgomery Lawrence, the agent general of the Governor General of East India Company Bahadur at Fort William, that is on the bank of river Hooghly or Bhagirathi in the Ganga Delta or Bengal area, now is the chairman of the Regency Council. He controlled the council members because he is the one appointed them. He is the chairman. They have to report him. And British will leave the Punjab territory when Maharaja gains the majority. That is, he will gain majority round about 1854, because when Rnj.Sg died in 39, he was almost 1 year old. That means 15 or 16 years means 1854, something like that. That means virtually they will stay there still lot of years. That was the Treaty of Bhairaval. So what is the Treaty of Bhairaval? Means subsidiary alliance. British army will not leave Punjab territory. Whereas when the British fought war with the Afghans, after the treaty was signed, they left the Kabul region and come back to Hindustan. When they fought war with the Burmese in 1820s, Treaty of Anbu was signed and they came back to British East India Company territory. When the war was fought with the Gurkhas in 1816 or so, they signed the Treaty of Sugali and left the Kathmandu, come back to Hindustani territory. Here they didn't left it because they have a strategy to control Punjab. They didn't control it immediately, annex it. If they wanted, they should have done it. This is again an intellectualism British displayed in acquiring the Indian territories. That itself is a very fascinating topic. We will not discuss that about much here. The important thing is the Treaty of Bhairaval is essentially British army will stay put in Punjab. That is essentially subsidiary alliance. Officially de jure, now the Khalsa Sarkar signed the treaty. That is an extension of this first Treaty of Lahore. The Khalsa government essentially became a protectorate, protected by the East India Company Bahadur representative Henry Montgomery Lawrence. All except in name, everything. That is not officially, still there is a Maharaja, he is the ruler, and there is a Regency Council headed by Henry Montgomery Lawrence. That is the fourth treaty, Treaty of Bhairaval. Then within few months, again the war broke down between some insurrection pattern. Sikhs didn't generally fought the army. The Diwan Mulraj in Multan region, the governor of Multan Subha rebelled, and certain Sikh leaders joined him. They fought war against the British East India Company. Even though Sikhs, the resident is responsible for all these things, and eventually British decided to annex the Punjab kingdom, and Finally, on March 29th, the Treaty of Lahore was signed. That is the final Treaty of Lahore. The MahaRaja and all the Sikh Sardars, they were called to come to the Fort Lahore. They were told they were taking away this kingdom, annexing it, and MahaRaja will be given certain amount of pension and he will be treated with respect, and all the Sardars will be treated with respect. They will get the pensions and estates and all those things. And they all signed the treaty, that is the Treaty of Lahore-II, that was signed on March 1849. Remember, that was in 1849, and 1846, 3 years back, almost the exactly similar time, the first Treaty of Lahore was signed. Here you see the 1846 March, this is 1849 March. This was round about 9th March, this is 29th March. The next day, 30th March, proclamation was announced from the Lahore Darbar, that is Khalsa Sarkar ceased to exist, and the Punjab, Khalsa territory, now became the British East India Company Bahadur territory, and afterwards Henry Montgomery Lawrence, who was already the chairman of the Regency Council, was designated. Board of Administration was formed. He was made chairman of the Board of Administration. That is just a title, a different title. Later they are called Chief Commissioners, later called Lieutenant Governors, later are called Governors of Punjab, that is the British Punjab territory. Essentially, the leader who administered that first was Henry Montgomery Lawrence. So, if you look at the intellectual legacy, what is the legacy of these? Those are the very, very important treaties. 5 treaties signed in 40 years from 1809 to 49 between the Sikhs, of course the British East India Company Bahadur, Sikhs and Dogras and British. These are the signatories of these treaties, and their first treaty was signed during the time of Lord Minto, the Governor General. The last treaty was signed at the time of Lord Dalhousie, 48 to 56. Of course, the Lord Hardinge was just before Lord Dalhousie. At that time, the 3 treaties were signed: the Lahore-I, Amritsar-II, and Bhairaval. All these were signed only 1 year. That's how the British intellectually manipulated and controlled them step by step, which generally we think that Hinduan leaders, they didn't depict that. Marathas controlled, but they were far inferior to them. That's why the Voice of India think tank wrote a lot of books on that. The Voice of India think tank, you can see the books, the 3 major, the intellectual called Trimurti of Hindu Renaissance, or Sitaram Goyal, the intellectual Kshatriya Mahayogi Ramswarup, and Acharya Coenrad Elst from Belgium. And you can read their books, and they formulated a very fascinating work on that. They are considered to be modern India's greatest thinkers. You can see Voice of India books, Big Bucket, IO, and so on. And you can go and look at them. They will give more details. Essentially, if these 5 treaties were not signed, I talked about in other the presentations, Pakistan should have not formed, and there should have been that much Islamic aggression, gangsterism in Hindu society. The entire concept of the Machiavellism, Nehruism, all these things should have been little bit different than we notice today, because Punjab government, Khalsa Sarkar, stay put means the entire this region should be in their control as a friendly state like Nepal. That's essentially Khalsa Sarkar or a Khalistan, but that is a different Khalistan than secessionist movement of Khalistan today. That is in general about the 5 treaties signed in 40 years, and 3 treaties were signed in 1 year itself, in 46. Very easy to remember. If you are starting from Lahore, hit Sutlej, that is the first treaty that was signed in Amritsar, and stay put for nearly 30 years. After the death of MahaRaja, war occurred in Punjab between the British and Sikh army, and British Army moved to Lahore. First Treaty of Lahore was signed, that is Indemnity Treaty. British got lot of territory within a week because the hilly areas were given to Raja Gulab Singh. That treaty was not signed in Lahore. That was signed next to Lahore, Amritsar. That is second Amritsar Treaty, and British still wanted to stay there. They manipulated and tried other treaty in the same year, Bhairaval Treaty, putting the British Army at turn in Punjab for more years and establishing a Regency Council and appointed their own leader, Henry Montgomery Lawrence, as the chairman of the Regency Council. Essentially, Khalsa Sarkar became a protectorate of the British East India Company. And 3 years later, war again broke down, and the final treaty, Lahore-II Treaty, was signed because it's a big treaty and annexation that has to be signed in Lahore. First treaty in Amritsar is a border, and first Lahore is the Indemnity Treaty, and next to that second Amritsar is the secession of Jammu and Kashmir, and Bhairaval Treaty is a preparation for final annexation, that is Lahore Treaty 2. So that is in a sense what is, and you can see the fascinating Punjab again. The British East India Company, before the war broke down, the Sutlej was the border. This is the Sutlej River, border between the Cis-Sutlej states and Trans-Sutlej states, Ludhiana, Firozpur and Ambala here, and that was the first treaty, Treaty of Amritsar. Then after war broke down, the Treaty of Lahore, British got Jalandhar and all those areas, Hoshiarpur and the Suya, Nakodar and all those areas. That was the first Lahore Treaty. Then Bhairaval Treaty came. Then they gave all these hilly regions, MahaRaja Gulab Singh, between Ravi River and Jhelum River. Then again, within couple of months, Bhairaval Treaty was made between Lahore and Amritsar. British Army stayed put in Punjab territory. Then finally, within 3 years, British Sarkar decided to annex the Punjab Kingdom and end the story. So second Lahore Treaty was signed. That is in essence about the 5 fascinating treaties. If they were not signed, there should have been no Pakistan. There should have been a very friendly state of Sikhs next to the Indian state, just like Kashmir. There should have been no Indira Gandhi assassination, and a lot of other things. All these things I have alluded, and you can think more about it. And by looking at the works of Mahayogi Sri Ram Swarupji, the intellectual Chatri of modern times, and these are their names, Mahayogi Sri Ram Swarupji, and intellectual Kshatriya Karma Yogi Sitaram Goyalji and Acharya Coenrod else. They already articulated some of these doctrines, the level. So that is about, in a sense, 5 treaties, and this is your articulate presenter at South Asia Maps. I hope you enjoyed these intellectual lectures. Please subscribe our channel excuse me, at South Asia Maps, Reddy, and I will see you soon in other presentations.